Thursday. Hope everyone's doing good and staying warm. I think they're calling it a polar vortex, which is a terrifying name for whatever this cold is, but the polar vortex is a little insane. But I think we're about to have not freezing temperatures again for a little bit, which will be nice. So I'd love to hear from folks. What industry are you in? What industry are you in? Because when we were first planning and launching the webinar, we were going to focus, pretty exclusively on the, Medicare and ACA industry. And then as we've continued to get more and more people, finishing out the registration, we're like, maybe there's a bigger mix of industries than we thought. So I want us to cater this as much as possible to what we got going on with everyone. Would love you to put here in the chat, what industry are you in? And the chat is a little engagement section on the right, if folks want to try to figure that one out. In fact, I'll even put in here AI. So I just dropped mine in. Here we go. And I found just the tab to make it a little bit crispier here. Quiet's okay. If you all want to lurk and kind of be in the background and listen to the webinar but not engage, that's okay. But if you do engage, it's way more fun. So if you're here and you're like hearing this, make this your call to action. Be like, fine, I'll go into that chat section and put my industry. Thank you, Jay. Insurance makes it a little bit more bumping. I appreciate y'all. Nice. And we'll get started in just about a minute. So let me hear what industry you're in. And is that, property and casualty insurance? Is it life? Is it health? Is it something else? Throw that there in the chat. And then actually, I'll show you all just something that I think is super cool, just because it's fun. Largest structure in the cosmos was just detected. And let me see if I can show this to you all here. I'm a little bit of I'm loving the science space stuff that's going on right now. I think the innovation there is freaking fascinating. So I'll show you guys this thing called BOSS, which is the largest structure in the known universe. And this, what we're looking at right here, is like a web, like a neural net of galaxies. Look at how that looks like the neurons in the brain, but each one of those little specks are galaxies. And the James Webb Telescope picked this up like a week ago, and it's been blowing my mind. And I'm like, man, I want to put this on a T-shirt or something like that. I think that'd be super cool. So let's jump in. I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to get started with the content today. And by the way, if anyone likes space stuff, or put that in the chat here too, we can always talk offline. So the title for today's webinar is Compliance is Your Secret Weapon, 5 Bold Moves to Drive Enrollments and Leads with Data. And I'm breaking down, the content today into 4 main categories. I'll reveal to you guys in just a second. The quick background, nice to see you all. If I've seen you before, nice to meet you for the first time. I'm Marc Bernstein, the founder and CEO at Balto. Started Balto just over 8 years ago, actually January 20th, 2017. And actually that was the day of, there was the Trump inauguration on that day. So seeing, the new inauguration happening 3 days ago was kind of some pretty crazy deja vu. So we've been building AI for 8 years. We started with real-time agent guidance that analyzes, calls live while they're happening. So maybe it's a sales call, or it's a customer service call, or claims, or collections, whatever your use case is. Analyze that live while it's happening and give the representatives real-time recommendations on their computer screen to help them be as effective as possible. So, let's say the rep is 3 minutes in and they forgot to give a certain compliance disclosure. It'll say, hey, you missed this. Make sure that you give this disclosure to the consumer. So we started with that, and then we basically built out an entire suite of AI products for the contact center. Because the contact center is a pretty interconnected beast. You can't just help agents. You got to help agents and supervisors and quality teams and operations leaders and executives. So we've built out functionality for all of those. And I can talk about that more a little bit later if folks have questions. So here are the 4 big compliance stories that we're going to talk about. And this is going to lead into some very tactical recommendations. The 4 big compliance stories starts with a mystery of why is compliance helpful? What is going on? The second is a challenge that the industry went through, specifically in the Medicare and ACA space that I know a lot of folks experience personally. The third is like a lot of really awesome efforts to clean up some of the, call it, mess that existed for a little bit of time. And then also, what is the future of this space? So I'm going to present to you all an interesting perspective. If you are in Medicare ACA, you are way more of an expert in this space than I am. I am your friend in AI. I am your partner on the outside. We've had customers in this space for over 6 years. It was one of the first verticals that we went into. So I've gotten a really good outside in perspective on what's happening, but you know the space way better. So if something that I say doesn't resonate, maybe you're right, and you can give me some grace on that. But this is what I've noticed. These are my observations from the friend from the outside. So leading up to 2020, when people were talking about compliance, I almost heard them frame it as like this interesting mystery where they would say, our most compliant reps also get the most enrollments, and we're not quite sure why. Throw it in the chat if that's true for you, or you noticed that that interaction with your company. Throw it in the chat. Give me a here, or something like that. But I was hearing this a lot. Our most compliant reps also get the most enrollments, and that certainly was counterintuitive because you'd think that compliance is just something that gets in the way of you ultimately, doing some sort of economic transaction with the customer beneficiary. But they were finding that the most compliant reps were getting the most enrollments, and folks were trying to figure out why. And a lot of the customers we were working with were actually taking data science teams and digging through their Balto transcripts and their call recordings and their data to try to piece together what it was. Is it that the most compliant reps are just the best at following directions and the most diligent? Maybe. Is it that they are the most professional and they kind of put consumers at ease with just the professional style communication? Also maybe. But what it seemed to show, and we saw again and again, and we heard from a lot of our customers, is that it was the consistency. That compliance is consistency. That if you are highly compliant and you're hitting all the items you need to, you're probably also not forgetting to ask about what prescriptions the beneficiary is taking. You're not forgetting to ask about, vision and dental and, how important that is to them. You're not forgetting to ask about, their doctors and, making sure those doctors are supported with the plan you choose. You're not forgetting that stuff. So it seems that like compliance is almost a good habit to being consistent. And I think folks were surprised to see that the most compliant reps were getting the most enrollments. If that resonates with you, if that sounds right, let me see it in the chat. I'd love to see the chat buzzing. But, it's also Thursday, early morning, so I get it. Then we saw a pretty stark transition in the space. Starting, call it, the open enrollment season or summer of 2020, through 2021. Big challenge. And the 3 graphs that you see here, I just went on Google this morning and got the most updated ones. And each of these are stock prices of publicly traded companies in the Medicare ACA market. And so a lot of folks actually lived through this. We saw it from the outside with a lot of the customers Balto was serving, but a lot of folks lived through this, and really challenging time. And there's obviously, any stock price has a lot of things that go into it, but it seems like the big cause, the big thing that was driving that compression of enterprise value for these companies, of market value, was that the LTVs of these plans were far less than had been forecasted. So, this industry was forecasting that customers would stay for way longer and they'd be happy with their plan. And turns out customers were switching all the time. And even the placement rate of them staying on their plan after the first 90 days was significantly lower than these companies had forecasted. So, in other words, the stock market got the signal: major retention issues. And it seemed clear that, when folks were digging in, that in some way, shape, or form, the issue was that seniors that were signing up were often unclear about what exactly they had signed up for. So they were unclear about, the different subsidies that they might be able to have access to. They were unclear about some of the plan details and what exactly they'd be eligible for. In some cases, they were unclear that they had signed up for a new healthcare plan at all. But there was definitely this problem of like confused seniors not being quite sure what they signed up for. And all of that was on top of these skyrocketing lead costs, because the stock prices in the industry and the success of these companies had been going so well that a bunch of competition flooded the market. The lead aggregators are sharing the leads 8, 10 times, and lead costs were more expensive than ever. So, like, really, really tough time in this industry, and then required a lot of cleanup. So, CMS complaints went way up as seniors were like, wait a minute, I didn't realize I signed up for a new healthcare plan. Wait a minute, I thought I'd be eligible for this. That wasn't explained to me. So the CMS complaints go way up. CMS gets tougher, and their stance becomes, it seems more, consumer friendly or beneficiary friendly, and much less industry friendly. The pro of that is it does push all these companies to make really big compliance investments. And that's investments in technology, investments in quality teams, investments in good process, and in some cases, investments that go beyond like what you might think would be necessary. So I'll give you a couple of examples here. One of the things that we saw our customers do is they would try to assess the cognitive capability of consumers and make sure that the seniors had cognitive compliance, that they actually were able to make healthcare decisions on their own. And I noticed this happen in a lot of different ways. One is just, does anyone help you make your healthcare decisions? Do you have, a daughter or a son or brother or sister or someone who helps you, or, what's it called? Someone have power of attorney. I noticed that a bunch. And then I even was talking to a healthcare company the other day, and what they do is they ask the senior to write down today's date, the plan that they selected, the name of the company, and then ask them to read it back to them to confirm that that's all right. I was talking to someone yesterday who does that exact motion. So, on one hand, good. The industry is doing a really good job of like making sure that folks know exactly what they're signing up for. On the other hand, it's a lot of hurdles to jump through. Like, think about if we had to go through all those processes in a different type of purchase that we were making, kind of nuts. But people were making big investments in compliance. Those are two examples. Another is, at the end of, the enrollment, say the beneficiary signs up, they have a new plan, it's awesome. There was often some sort of, here's my direct line, I'm your, licensed agent. Call me if you have any problems. Call me if you need anything. So, you wouldn't have, a beneficiary who, had a bad experience, and then they get pounded with phone calls over the open enrollment season. And, someone calls them in and says, hey, have you checked if your plan's eligible for this? And they realize they're disappointed and they switch. So it was like this proactive competitive defense. So we saw a lot of these sort of plays going into motion. And while it was challenging, it looks like actually it's been largely effective. And now we're kind of transitioning toward the future. Folks have gotten used to this. So, we've seen 2 strong enrollment seasons back to back, this year and last year. The Balto customers that I've spoken with have said like record years, really, really solid years. When you read, I think his name is Jared Stock. He has this awesome kind of Medicare newsletter. Shout out to Jared. You read his newsletter, and it says that revenues are pretty much up across the board for all plan types. So really, really cool to see that enrollments are going very well. CMS is also taking on a little bit more of an industry-friendly tone, saying, "Hey, we've heard from you. You want clarity." It's sometimes it feels like you all don't know exactly what we're looking for, and then you submit your script, and then you then hear there's problems with it, and you didn't really quite understand why. And if you had known originally, then you would have made those changes ahead of time. And it seems like the communication is getting tighter, and there's more of an industry friendly tone that we're supporting everybody here. We're seeing the processes now. Folks have had a couple years to run them, get really tight around Medicare and ACA. Things even like lead screening teams, where if you think about 5 years ago when we were talking to customers in this space, folks really didn't want to have lead screeners because they're like, I don't want to put a single barrier between a really quality, between any lead and a licensed agent who can, get them enrolled in a plan. I don't put any barriers at all. And then I think that, the lead costs went up and folks are like, okay, we need a little bit more operational efficiency. If we can do some qualification on the front end, then maybe that'll be worth it. And if we can do a good job with that, we won't lose leads from it. So I am seeing an uptick in the use of kind of lead screening teams. Just an example of a tighter process that we're seeing from Medicare and ACA. And I'll tell you, at the peak of the compliance kind of correction, if you will, we saw companies build their QA and compliance teams. Like, I'll be honest, overbuild them. I spoke with, one of our customers. I would say this was probably about 6 or 9 months ago, and they had about 400 or 500, licensed agents, and they had 60 folks in their quality management organization, 60. And that was, I think, something like $4 million a year in, headcount just from that quality organization. Like, that's a ton. So how can we get to a point where you don't need 60 people to stay compliant? And I'm going to show you guys in just a couple minutes tactics, specific tactics, ways you can organize your team so you can have folks be more efficient and they're spending their time doing stuff that really moves the needle. But we've seen a lot of improvements there and tighter processes from Medicare ACA. We've seen what I'm calling positive pressure on lead aggregators. I'm hearing less and less of they sold this lead to 10 people. I'm hearing less and less of a beneficiary called in and they had no idea why they were calling. They thought I was the healthcare company. So I'm seeing less of that. It seems like the lead aggregators have done a really good job of improving the quality of the leads that they're transferring. And then the other thing I'm noticing is improvements in digital marketing. I was talking about how folks call in and say, "Oh, I thought you were my healthcare company. I wanted to ask you a question about, my doctor in this recent visit I had." And folks in the Medicare and ACA space would say, "No, that's actually not us. But can I help you change your healthcare plan?" And that's like a poor quality lead. Like you really don't want that, because even if you do, help that person change their healthcare plan, then you're in a little bit of a tricky spot where they called in for something that was not that, and that's a little bit of a compliance gray area. So that's not a good lead. And we've seen, folks do a better job of digital marketing, making sure that if you're doing, Google pay-per-click, or even display ads, around the internet, that the copy is much clearer about exactly what you are getting. And so people click that, and that lowers your lead costs too, because you don't have people clicking leads that ultimately are not actually good leads for your licensed agents. So we're seeing all of these different kind of advances going at the same time. And I'm curious, folks, if that resonates with you. Put something in the chat if you're like, "Yep, we're seeing that too," or if you're not and you're seeing something different. I'd love to hear it. So throw something in the chat if you're so inclined. So what's next? Where is this going? It is leaning into the enrollment growth because it's going well. and then driving operational efficiency, making sure that you're a profitable and sustainable business with good retention metrics, and that you're not paying an arm and a leg for compliance or paying an arm and a leg for leads. So those are kind of the two trends we're seeing moving forward at the same time. So tactics. How do we translate this into tactics? Um, 5 key tactics that we're seeing in the market right now. And regardless of what industry you're in, these are probably good tactics to use. And I'll explain them in detail, even show you guys some examples of how you can actually set up your teams to optimize for these. The first, aggregating what we're calling pre-complaints. And folks are pretty aware the last thing you want is a complaint actually gets to CMS. Then you got to deal with it. Then you have a black mark, so to speak. Like, how can you try to identify things that could turn into complaints before they get to CMS? And then, have a supervisor, re-engage that beneficiary and make sure that whatever needs to be corrected is corrected. We're seeing a lot of success there with folks saying, show me in one spot, one easy spot, all of my pre-complaints or things that are risks of being complaints. Show it in one easy spot so I can have a team run down the line, check all those things, and make sure the people that need to get reached out to get reached out to. The second is focusing the QA efforts on escalations. I think that a lot of organizations have historically been used to, you have an enrollment, and then you have your quality your quality analyst listen to the entire call start to finish and score every item on the call. So did the agent introduce himself? Yes, 5 points. Did they say that they're a licensed agent? Yes, 10 points. Did they ask if the beneficiary is Medicare Parts A and D? Yes, 3 points. And that's what they're used to doing. But that being said, that's clearly not the best use of time. Like, AI is now able to do that scoring stuff. So what does that mean? It means that you can take your QA resources and only focus on the no's. Focus on when something was really important to go right and it did not go right. And that's where you want someone listening to it and be like, I'm going to check and get visibility into all of the possible problems that my organization is encountering. So that is the shift we're seeing. Instead of just randomly listening to calls or having folks listen to every enrollment and score the entire enrollment, folks are saying, let's have AI do the scoring, let's have AI do the listening, and then the quality teams are focused on the exceptions. Building relationships and asking for referrals. We touched on this a little bit with building relationships. It is giving the beneficiary some avenue to reach back to you if they're having an issue, so they don't just get picked off by the next different licensed agent who calls them. So that's something that we've seen be really good. Giving your direct line, giving your name, saying like, I'm your licensed agent. My name is blank. I'm here to help you. Can you write this down? That sort of stuff. And also, if you think about it, making sure that you are taking time in that interaction to really show that you're understanding the beneficiary's needs is important there. Little bit different with ACA calls because the population is different and the volume is different. But especially with Medicare, like taking a little bit of extra time, seniors really appreciate it. So, I would caution folks against trying to rush your agents to get to the next lead, get to the next lead. We have a lot of people in the queue. Let's go, let's go. And I would say if they can spend a little extra time building a relationship, you guys will see the benefits of that in better plan retention. And then asking for referrals, it's a why not, it's a why not. And what happens if you do it consistently? Anybody who is a senior signing up for themselves, there is a very reasonable chance that they live with another senior or they know other seniors. And if you think about, like when folks are talking about their days, they kind of talk about maybe the most interesting or engaging part of their day. And you're telling someone about your day and you've spent, could be 45 minutes, maybe even an hour, on the phone with a licensed agent, changing your Medicare plan. That's something you're going to talk about. That's something you're going to talk about. And you want to make sure they talk about it well. And they say, oh, I could give you my number. That person was very kind. They were very kind and very helpful. Like, that's a really good thing. So if you're making sure that your folks are, when they get enrollments, consistently asking for referrals, like, what could that do for your numbers? Is it 5% of the time it actually results in a referral? Is it 10%? What if that actually translates to 5% or 10% increase in revenue? Just from a simple, do you live with anyone who is also over the age of 65, or anyone you think I could assist? Like, something like that just makes a big difference. It's a small thing, makes a big difference. It's a lever. Understanding your lead sources. This is a really interesting one where it's particularly important to understand when, first of all, where are people calling in from? So where do they find you? Then when they found you, what expectations did they have in their mind? What did they think your company did? What were they planning on doing for themselves? And that's the sort of stuff that, because so much of this interaction is happening over the internet. Billboards are still huge, by the way, and that's kind of easier. But a lot of the lead generation is happening in one way or another through PPC, pay-per-click, or lead aggregators. So given that that's the case, having an understanding of what people's mindset when they actually engage with a company is difficult. But a lot of it comes out in the interaction, in the actual call with the licensed agent, right? People will often say, I was just, going online, and, my, daughter said that, this year I should make sure that my plan is up to date. So I just, typed in Medicare, and you guys came up. That's a really important thing to know, right? So try to understand, and they'll say that in these phone interactions. So if you're able to take all those little micro stories and piece them together into data of what are people saying about how they are finding these companies and what the benefits are, that's important. And then the last thing we're seeing is proactive outbound retention, where agents will call back folks that they signed up and enrolled in previous years and say, "Hey, I spoke to you last year. Check it in and make sure you're happy with your plan. Is there anything that I can do to change your plan, or any benefits that you wish you had?" And again, same benefit of making sure that that lead does not get sniped by someone else and fall out in the form of poor retention. So we're seeing a lot of these tactics, and here's how you can actually organize your teams to go after them. So we're first seeing folks pretty simply bucket into, was it enrollment yes or enrollment no? Unsuccessful no, successful yes. Then there's kind of three buckets within that, right? So whether you're unsuccessful or successful, the three buckets within that are, is it good to go? Is everything fine? Was there some compliance issue, or was there a performance issue? And I think it's really important to distinguish those two because different folks in your organization are better equipped to help with if there's a compliance problem versus a performance problem. And my suggestion, and I'll explain this more in a second, is that the actual supervisors are in a better spot to help coach on performance, and QA and compliance is a better spot to coach on compliance. And I'll explain why in just a second. So this is like fundamentally how you can break down all of your different folks who call in come into into these buckets one way or another. So the first thing that's probably like most important is to get good visibility into the compliance exceptions. And that's what your QA and compliance folks should be focused on. Your number one priority is to find the folks who enrolled and had a compliance problem. That's the number one priority, because that's like the most likely to actually lead to a CMS complaint or drop out in the form of poor retention. So that's like your most urgent and important thing. If you're QA and compliance, point your team to make sure that they are nailing every single compliance exception with successful enrollments. Once you do that, it is then also helpful to look for the compliance exceptions for unsuccessful enrollments. But if I was setting up a queue of work for my team, they would absolutely do the compliance exceptions for successes first, and then I'd have them look for all the compliance exceptions in the failures. Then we're looking into performance. With performance, you want to both look at successes and unsuccesses about equally, but you're looking for different things. So if the enrollment was successful, You don't need to have you're not trying to look for opportunities to coach the person to go for the close better. You're not trying to coach them to do a better job with needs analysis. Like, save that for the stuff that didn't work. When the enrollment was successful, what you want to look for is, did they build the relationship? Were they driving referrals? And get those micro behaviors and drive them up all the way as much as possible across your sales team. So for successful enrollments, say, show me all the successes where the rep could have done a better job asking for a referral or building the relationship. Otherwise, if they're successful enrollment, leave them alone, coach something else. Then for the unsuccessful enrollments, that's where you want the supervisors to focus on driving needs analysis, closing, and objection handling, and also presentation, explaining plan benefits. Those are the kind of the big levers, but only do those for the things that didn't work, because then you can show them how, if they would have done it differently, how they would have potentially been able to get an enrollment. And our perspective at Balto is that supervisors are the ones in the best position to do this coaching because they have the relationship with the agent. That's their direct report. That's the one who they're asking about how their weekend is. That's the one who they're sitting next to all day. That's the one who maybe they had a hand in training. Maybe they hop on some of their calls themselves. So those two have the relationship. When it comes to something that's performance related, the supervisor has all of that context. So it's not like, in that organization I mentioned that had 60 quality managers, that your quality manager number 42 trying to coach the agent on, they could have done a better job with needs analysis. Like that can sometimes feel like it's like big boss on the other side of the screen being like, I found your calls and found your problem. And you're like, you don't know me. You don't get me. So our recommendation is really focus supervisors on driving performance and focus the quality and compliance on driving compliance. So then what does the marketing team do? The marketing team is looking for the good to goes, both in the successful enrollment and the unsuccessful. So no problem with compliance, no problem with performance. Just compare like what is leading to successful enrollments versus unsuccessful ones. And the sort of motions you want to do in listening to those interactions is diving into lead sources. Where did these folks come from? How did they find us? Diving into messaging. What were their expectations when they found us? And then diving into needs. What were they talking about? Were they talking about certain aspects of vision or dental or prescriptions or, doctors in the network? Like, what were they talking about? And you can use that then to go and try to, advertise on those keywords to get more leads from those sort of keywords, and then align your message there. So that's kind of how marketing is digging into this sort of information. So I'll show you guys on the Balto side what it looks like. And I'm going to share a different tab here. All right. So we should see something here that says ACA QA scorecard. So what I'm showing you all is how large language models, LLMs, which is basically this newest variant of AI in the kind of generative AI family, how LLMs can catch context and catch complexity that previously, if you were trying to look for stuff with keywords, would be impossible. And you can build out a whole QA scorecard. You can take all of your stuff and put on a QA scorecard. Did the agent greet the consumer and introduce themselves? Did the agent inform the consumer the line's being recorded? This is an interesting one. Did the agent ask leading questions when gathering the household income? How would you find that with traditional speech analytics? Well, I'll show you how we can do it with Balto. What'll happen is, if you were a Balto customer, you would basically have this section up here at the top where you are typing in or copying and pasting whatever, like the criteria for your organization. So how does your QA team, if you're training your QA team to assess this correctly, what are you telling them counts in here? So for example, do not probe for income brackets or inform the customer of their state minimum to qualify. But you can help the customer, quote, do the math if they're unsure of their income level by asking probing questions. So, basically customers say, this is how we do it. Then on the back end, this is what Balto does. We have a team of prompt engineers, and those are folks with masters and PhDs in machine learning, and they're leading our entire prompt engineering organization, and they are writing a prompt to ask these AI models to look at this information and provide back an answer. And writing a prompt is like another form of coding, if you will. It's just coding with natural language. So I won't bore you guys with the full details, but I'll kind of give you a quick scroll. This is like what it might look like. You start with like an introduction to give the large language model an idea of the context of what it's about to receive. What is the data about to be? So this is a conversation with a company called Balto Health, which sells insurance plans. And then you say, I'm about to feed you a transcript, right? Notice here's the question answer. You ask the LLM the big question, and then you give it a whole bunch of different context of examples and kind of feed the rules in. It can get pretty complex. But thank goodness, that's something that, like, look at this. It's even giving an example of like an agent customer back and forth that would qualify here. So thank goodness that's something that the Balto team is doing and our customers don't have to do. But the big idea is that you were able to answer a question that's very complex and very contextual with a lot of parts using an LLM, and this will get scored in your QA scorecard. From there, you are breaking it into, well, hold on. Is this an enrollment or is this not? And that's something that you would put here into what we call an eligibility prompt. So you could basically have two different versions and say, call the first set of data enrollments and the second set not. And you can say, all right, when I click the button that says enrollments, I only want to see the things that are, quote, a winning call, the end successful enrollment that has all of these different aspects to it. So pretty complicated. But again, this is something that the Balto team writes out for you guys. So, now you can think about it's looking for all these different criteria. It's segmenting it into, was it successful enrollment and unsuccessful enrollment? So you're kind of able to go and do that workflow that we just talked about. Successful, unsuccessful. Is there a compliance problem? You can check for those. Is there a performance problem? Check for those. And if there's none, we have a different module called Insights that will say, answer questions like, why are my customers calling? What benefits do they like the most? And you can also use one of our tools called Balto GBT and just ask that question. It'll look through a bunch of call recordings and give you back the answer. So that's like kind of the back end of what's happening. And then it's aggregated for your QA team in a really easy interface. So non-compliant criteria, it goes through the scorecard and sorts top to bottom. Here's all the calls that were not compliant. Right there. There it is. And you can say, oh, there's 36 calls where it missed. Pretend this was like TCPA, or pretend this was reading the summary of benefits. 36 calls that were yes, a win, an enrollment, and we're missing summary benefits, all aggregated right there. So you can see how instead of your team kind of picking and plopping around various interactions, you can actually break their calls up into these workflows and have different folks in your organization responsible for different things rather than everyone kind of having their hands in everything. And once you have this data, there's a whole bunch of awesome opportunities. For example, finding coaching opportunities that this person right here misses space to react 94% of the time. And there's 16 calls and he's missing that pretty consistently. So I can go and assign that to a supervisor and say, let's give this to Liam at balto.ai. Hey, Liam. And then Liam will get a notification saying, hey, you just got a coaching task. Tyson's missing this particular capability. So what I just walked everybody through today was kind of a story from start to finish of where has the Medicare and ACA space been and where has the compliance thinking, how is the compliance thinking developed? And showing how that's developed, I tried to end with, okay, how do we turn that into enrollments? How do we turn that into more information on leads? And how do we turn that to better retention and stickiness? This is the sort of stuff we do with our customers all the time. We do have, I believe, 5 minutes left here. So I'm happy to take questions if folks have 5 minutes of questions. If you want to book a demo with us and see this technology, and we can even create, a scorecard for you, and you can say, hey, I have these 4 criteria that are kind of tough to judge. Can you guys show me that you can score it? Can I give you like 100 calls and you score it and prove to me you can do this? So we're happy to do that kind of stuff with you. You can hit this QR code for book a demo. And we also have a Balto newsletter. We let you know about new capabilities and features that are coming up and new stuff that we're building, and also insights in the space. And you can subscribe to the newsletter there. So I'll look in the chat and see if there's any questions. If you got it, throw it in there. Otherwise, I'll leave this up for a minute. But thank you all. This has been fun. I hope you enjoyed my thinking on this today. I don't see any questions, so I'll let you all go 3 minutes early. But appreciate your time, and reach out to us for a demo right there, QR code with your phone, or subscribe to the newsletter. Or you can actually follow me or reach out to me. I'm linkedin.com/in/Balto CEO. LinkedIn.com/in/Balto CEO. Thank you all so much, and I'll see you next time.